Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's session. We're absolutely thrilled to have you here with us for Connecting Through Care, Belong in Community in Action. Today's all about coming together, sharing ideas, and exploring how we can build deeper spaces of belonging within our communities. We have a wonderful day ahead of us, and we're so glad that you could be a part of it. Thank you so much for being here. Before we start, I would like to take a moment to recognize the land on which we are gathered today. I'm currently joining everybody from Toronto, which is seated on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. As we come to talk about community together and belonging and the care of our elders, I want us to remember that Indigenous communities have practiced deep care for the land and for their ancestors on this territory for thousands of years. We acknowledge our shared responsibility to honor this land, to listen to the wisdom of those who came before us, and to move forward together in the spirit of reconciliation and friendship. So, thank you so much for, oh, I forgot to share this. Um, you can visit nativeland.ca to learn more about the land on which you are joining us today. So, welcome to Family Councils Week 2026. It is such a pleasure for Family Councils Ontario to celebrate this event every year. We do it in different formats. Last year, for those of you who have been able to join us, we had a hybrid conference in Hamilton. This year, we tried to do things a little bit differently. Instead of doing a fully online version or asking people to come to a specific place, we did a family councils tour. We wanted to join folks in their communities. And we had four stops. We had one in Kingston on May 19, in Oakville on June 4th, and Sudbury yesterday. And then this is the last stop. And we really wanted to do a virtual one because we have always done these virtual gatherings and webinars. It is a great way for us to reach folks just all across Ontario. And we wanted to make sure that our information and resources are always available to everybody. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us. All the tour stops had a similar run of the day. It was always a guest speaker in the morning and then an FCO-led session on community and belonging in the afternoon. So we're going to have the same structure for today. We have a guest speaker in the morning, and then in the afternoon, we will have a session led by Family Councils Ontario. So just a few logistics and housekeeping rules. You'll notice right now that everybody is in listen-only mode. We have reserved time at the end for an interactive question and answer period. If you would like to ask questions for our guest presenter, I invite you to do so in the Q&A box, and then we're going to get to them at the end. And you can use the chat feature to just chat, have a discussion amongst yourselves. If you have a reaction to something you want to share, you're more than welcome to do so in the chat feature. And all of the presentation materials and resources that are going to be shared during the day today will be shared with you following the presentation. Um, so yes, we want to encourage participation. We would love to hear your questions. If you have anything you want to share with us, this is what we're here for. I know it's a little bit different online than in person, but we would love to hear from you in the chat feature or the Q&A box. And if you're more comfortable asking a question, you will also be able to open your audio during the interactive period to ask your question. So it is my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker for the day, Ashley Flanagan. Dr. Ashley Flanagan is a senior knowledge broker at the Ontario Centers for Learning, Research and Innovation in Long-Term Care, CLRI, at Bruyere Health, where she leads equity, diversity, and inclusion initiatives across Ontario's long-term care sector. She holds a PhD in aging, health, and well-being from the University of Waterloo, with research specializing in the experiences of older 2Ls LGBTQI+ adults. Ash's work has shaped national campaigns, e-learning modules, and policy recommendations supporting 2Ls LGBTQI+ older adults. A recognized leader in aging and health equity, she bridges research, practice, and policy to advance affirming and inclusive care. So without further ado, I would like to pass the mic to Ashley.
Thank you so much. Just give me a moment while I navigate all the tech and get my slide deck up for everybody. I think we should be in action now. Okay,
Yes.
thank you. All right. So this morning, thank you so much for the warm welcome and introduction. As mentioned, my name is Ashley Flanagan. You can also call me Ash. My pronouns are she and her, and I am a senior knowledge broker at the Ontario Centers for Learning, Research and Innovation in Long-Term Care at Bruyere Health. I'll say a little bit more about who we are and what we do in just a moment. And I just want to thank everybody for making the time to be here today. Whether you're a family council member, a caregiver, a team member, or someone who interacts with long-term care homes in some other capacity, the fact that we're all here today sharing this space really tells me that we all care for the people who live in long-term care. And so over about the next hour and a half-ish, we'll be going through some slides and some content to explore what it actually takes to build belonging in long-term care. Not in the abstract, but something, hopefully some practical tips that we can take away, that we can bring back to our councils, to the homes that we interact with, and the different various roles and interactions and engagements that we have. So before we go any further, I want to build on the land acknowledgement that we just shared and acknowledge that I'm coming to you from the Huron Tract, the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Attawandarunk, or neutral peoples, colonially known as Stratford, Ontario. And the Ontario CLRI at Bruyere Health, where I work, is situated in Ottawa, Ontario, on the traditional unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation. And I hold this acknowledgement in the spirit of Debowin, the Ojibwe teaching of truth. Truth means more than just naming the land. It means being honest about the ongoing harms of colonization, including within long-term care, and asking ourselves what it means to be in right relationship with Indigenous peoples in the work that we do. And I know we're all joining from different places across Ontario, each with its own history, its own Indigenous peoples, its own responsibilities. So I'll share a couple more links in the chat that are useful in learning more about the lands on which you live, work, and play. Just building on the fantastic resource that native.ca, nativeland.ca, that was shared earlier. Okay, so as promised, let me introduce you to the Ontario Centers for Learning, Research and Innovation in Long-Term Care, also known as Ontario CLRI or CLRI, which is the program behind today's session. And to give you a context, in case you aren't familiar with who we are and what we do broadly, the Ontario CLRI enhances quality of life and care in long-term care by supporting residents and team members across the province through providing education and training, sharing research and innovations, and identifying and developing resources for long-term care homes. We are a program of the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Long-Term Care that acts as a resource for the sector to enhance the health and well-being of folks who live and work in long-term care. And the Ontario CLRI as a program is funded through the Government of Ontario and hosted at 3 different sites. So Briere Health, where I'm situated, Baycrest Health Sciences, and the Schlegel UW Research Institute for Aging. And the EDI program, which is under the umbrella of the Ontario CLRI at Briere Health, with support from the Ontario CLRI at the Research Institute for Aging. Our work is supported in funding also through the Government of Ontario and comes to us through the Ontario CLRI. And the views expressed here do not necessarily reflect the views of the province. And so our EDI program, none of the work that we do would be possible without our incredibly dynamic advisory committee. The committee brings together, as you can see on your screen here, representatives from across the long-term care sector, including long-term care homes and representatives, researchers, sector partners, and importantly, people who live in long-term care homes. And so we are eternally grateful for their contributions. Okay, and that brings us to today. What we're here to chat about and how our time is going to be structured. We'll start with some foundational concepts, thinking about what equity means, what belonging looks like, and why there is sometimes and often a gap between good intentions and lived experience. And then we'll get a little bit more practical. We'll talk a bit about what roles family councils and team members can play as partners in building belonging. Then we'll close with some resources and a bit of time for questions. And so as we move through today's session, I'll be inviting you to engage either in the chat or through the Mentimeter. We'll have multiple ways for folks to engage with varying levels of anonymity as we move through today's session. And so building on that sense of anonymity and trying to build a sense and feeling of safety throughout our conversation today, we also have a few guiding principles. And these guiding principles were developed ahead of the Allied for Inclusivity Forum that we hosted in 2022. And I want to draw our attention here to them this morning because it will not only help us create this space, but it could also be a resource for folks as we move away from our conversation today. These guiding principles, we still lean on them for every session that we do because they really help set the tone for the conversation and help us build a space where we can all share. Because we recognize that we all come from different walks of life, different experiences, levels of familiarity with equity, diversity, and inclusion, and belonging, as today's topic is. And that's really what makes the session so rich. And so these principles really remind us how we approach each other and ourselves with humility and with curiosity. So today we're embracing curiosity. It's okay not to know something. We're here to listen, to understand, not necessarily to respond in all instances. So we're letting the information absorb and resonate with us. We're respecting our stories. So if there's anything personal that comes up or any situations that are shared, it stays in this space as much as we can. In a webinar that will be also recorded and shared, but it will be stayed here. No one knows everything, but together our knowledge grows. And this is the key one here, is that we don't expect everybody to come in perfectly perfect. We know that we can't possibly know everything, but the more that we are in conversation with each other, as we learn and unlearn, our knowledge grows. And so with that in mind, we want to share the space. So we encourage folks who tend to hold back and maybe just listen to lean in and share. And then if you are very outspoken and have a lot to say, feel free to make room for other folks to join into the conversation and to share throughout as we move through today. And as we also encourage, we want to hear from you. So use the chat, use the emojis, use the reactions. We want to hear from you because there is a lot of knowledge here in this space and lived experience. So we are here to both learn and unlearn together. And so in the spirit of that engagement and wanting to hear from you, we're going to start getting familiar with Mentimeter, which is one of the options available to us to engage throughout today's session. So feel free to go to menti.com, enter the code on your screen. I'll also drop a little bit of a link in the chat for folks. There we go. So you can go through to menti.com. It'll open another browser in your window, in your desktop. You can enter the code. That'll take you right to our presentation. I'll activate the Menti in just a moment. So it should say, please stay tuned or something like that. And then you can also follow along on the slides as we go through today too. So it's kind of a little handy feature. You can also scan the QR code on the screen if you happen to have a smart device handy that is separate. Feel free to scan the code. It will take you right to our Menti. So there's lots of ways to get online. But with that in mind, I'm seeing lots of folks giving us the thumbs up in the Menti. So I'm going to activate our first question, which is, how would you rate your familiarity with EDI or equity, diversity, and inclusion concepts? Mostly, completely? A lot of the mostly. Fantastic. Somewhat. Okay, this is right in alignment with that. You know what? We know some stuff. We're here to learn. We're here to grow. And we can also learn from our folks that have a little bit more experience and familiarity with the concept that we'll be covering today. But don't fear, we'll do some shared knowledge building to give us a solid foundation for everybody as we head into today's session. Okay, so thank you all for logging in and engaging on the Menti. We'll go to our next question, which is an open text box. So in one word, what does belonging mean to you? And for some of us, belonging may be resonated and rooted in moments when we felt like we've been included. And it might also be rooted in moments when we feel like we haven't belonged and kind of getting to know what it doesn't feel like in order to move forward and towards what it does feel like. So we're thinking about welcoming, connection and comfort, being my authentic self, no masking, absolutely being able to present yourself in your fullest form, feeling seen, acceptance, everyone has a voice and feels welcome in the space, acceptance coming through really strongly, welcoming also, feeling safe, feeling free, a space with no judgment, open to learning and growing, feeling valued. Absolutely. This is fantastic and exactly what belonging means for folks. And it's the feeling, the sense of comfort, the sense of connection, the sense of feeling welcomed, wanted, accepted is what we're really aiming for when it comes. So we can build that together when it comes to long-term care. Appreciation of your individuality. Yes, we're all individuals. There's no one like us. And so being able to be our individual authentic selves is really important. Wow, these are really fantastic responses. So I think we're all on the same page here. Community, absolutely. Yeah, I really do think we're all on the same page. We're all in this journey together. So as we move through today's session, maybe we'll pick up a few extra little tips and tricks of what we can do to further build that sense of belonging or create a culture of belonging within our long-term care homes. Okay, fantastic. So as I promised, I think we're all on the same page, but as I promised, we'll get to familiar with a couple of the words that help ground us in today's conversation. Because these concepts get used a lot. And there's different ways of interpreting, there's different ways that they get picked up and used, and they don't always mean the same thing to everyone, or mean the same thing that people assume that they mean. So to build that shared understanding today, we're going to start with intersectionality. And intersectionality describes how the different aspects of a person's identity, their race, their gender, their age, religion, disability, sexual orientation, the list goes on, overlap and interact with each other. So a resident isn't just an older adult. They are a whole person with a history, a culture, a faith, a way of understanding their own identity. And in long-term care, when we plan for, the typical resident or just the average resident or the average person that we are expected to interact with, we can really miss the people whose lives don't fit within that box, right? We're all individuals, we're all unique. So having that intersectional lens to our interactions and the care that we provide or the support that we provide is really important. So that's intersectionality, real quick. And then we have equity. And so equity is different from equality. And equality means giving everyone the same thing. So in this image on your screen that I find really helpful and resonates with most folks, equality is giving everybody the exact same shoe. Probably the exact same size, the exact same type, the exact same, whether it's a cleat or a running shoe or a sandal, it's the exact same for everyone. Whereas equity means giving people what they actually need to have a fair chance or to thrive. And so this looks like giving folks a shoe that fits. So a shoe that is fit for purpose. And so this looks different for everyone. So if everyone receives the same welcome package or the same shoe, but it's only in English, talking about the welcome package, not a shoe now, and some residents communicate primarily in another language, we've given everyone the same thing, but it hasn't worked equally well. So equity asks us to consider, what does this person actually need? And so feel free to use that image as if we're trying to explain the difference between equality and equity moving forward. And now belonging. You've just told me what belonging means to each of you. And I want to add another layer and help us distinguish belonging from inclusion. Inclusion can be structural, so making sure someone has a seat at the table or included in conversations. Whereas belonging, and as you beautifully illustrated before, is when someone feels that they are genuinely wanted, that they're seen and that they're valued, as we heard, for who they are and not in spite of it. So we can have inclusive policies, right? We can make an effort to have inclusive policies, but these policies can still produce spaces where people don't feel like they belong. So we need to have that lens of the intention and the impact. And so our goal is to go further than policies and to create those spaces and to build that sense of belonging, supported by policies, but we're building that in, that sense of feeling seen, valued, welcomed for folks. And so those are really quick. Some of those shared concepts that help ground us in today's conversation. And so why does this matter? And so I think most folks in this virtual room, I think we're on the same page, but whether we're a family member, a caregiver, a family council member, part of a care team, or a leader in long-term care, or a researcher in long-term care, I think we genuinely want to do right by the people we support. And so the challenge really isn't ill intent or bad intent. The challenge is when those good intentions don't automatically transfer or translate into inclusive experiences. So to help us visualize what that where that gap is, I'm going to share a couple of scenarios drawn from real situations that we hear happen in long-term care all the time. Oops, wrong direction. So our first story, our first scenario is about a resident who has always been sociable. When she first moved in, she would attend music programs. Whenever her family would come to visit, they would find her hanging out in the rec room. But over time, her family noticed that she was spending more and more time in her room, alone. When her daughter asked her why, she said, I don't think that I'm meant to be here. And that could be for any number of reasons. And we left it pretty open and open to interpretation for a reason. And so the activity programming, so the music, the food, the events, the celebrations, reflected a cultural lens that wasn't hers. So nobody had actively excluded her, but nothing felt like it was for her either. And so that's the gap where the team was trying to include and to encourage participation. The programming was designed for a version of a resident or a community that didn't really reflect who was actually there. And so in this case, we saw some withdrawal. And then our second scenario is from a team member perspective. And so a PSW witnessed a family member making a discriminatory comment towards a colleague. She knew it was wrong, but she didn't know what to say or what she was allowed to say or how to say, or if she was even her place um, to step in. And she worried about creating a conflict that would make her working environment more difficult, more challenging. So she didn't say anything. And by not saying anything, it really sat with her and she felt terrible afterwards. And so this is really common. And it's really common that I hear from folks in long-term care. I knew it wasn't okay, but I didn't know what to do. And that's not a failure, it's a systems gap. So when people don't have the language, the tools, or the sense of support to act, that's where our good intentions stop or stall, or there's a gap there. And so these two scenarios highlight the impact that creating a culture of belonging within our long-term care homes. So so that the sense of belonging where a resident doesn't question whether they're meant to be here, or a team member who feels confident in stepping in to support a colleague. That's because the long-term care home has done the work to ensure that equity, inclusion, and belonging are front and center. And so not as a compliance exercise, but it's as the foundation that makes our relationships, our care relationships work, especially for people who are most at risk of being or feeling unseen or not welcome. And so building it requires everyone. It requires all of us, residents, family members, caregivers, family councils, team members, leadership. We all have a role to play. And so with that in mind, I want to share a little bit of a video to help us reflect on where we all fit. And it's just a short video, a couple of minutes. I'm going to cue that up here. And oh, don't start. But so we use this video a lot in the workshops and the presentations that we do. We're going to watch it together now, and I want folks to sit with it. And then afterwards, if you feel comfortable, you feel confident, I want to hear a little bit about what it brings up for you. And we'll have a couple of ways that you can share that. So without further ado, here is our video. Okay, so take a moment, reflect on the video, and think about what stood out for you. And when you're ready, feel free to share some of your reflections. You can use the chat. I'll also queue up another Mentimeter slide. So if you're already in the Menti, you can share your reflections via Menti. So there's the link and the code again, the QR code, but I can see folks have stayed put. So if it doesn't pop up for you, feel free to refresh. So you can pop your answers, what stood out for you in the Menti. You can put them in the chat. We can see one response already. It was so meaningful. Absolutely. So many aspects of diversity. Yeah, it covers a lot of ground in a short video. The changing facial emotions on the people. Yeah, so as they were holding their card and whatever was written on their card, their facial expressions have changed from the first time we saw them to the second time we saw them, perhaps. That we make a lot of assumptions in our everyday life. We do. We like to put folks, we like to categorize things. It's just the way that a lot of our brains work as humans, is that we like to fit people, places, with fit things in categories so that we can make sense of it. The range of positive and negative impacts of being included or not. Absolutely. There's a full spectrum when we think about belonging and what it means for folks. It's the empathy that it creates for sure, the many ways that someone can feel excluded. Showing inclusion by one makes others also tend to include. Yeah, lead by example, right? I like that children were included to show the impact on various generations. Absolutely. There's generational impacts when we think about belonging, and we think about perhaps the assumptions that we're making about folks. And I find that this video, it tends to stay with folks. It tends to surface a lot of what we've been seeing here, some of those assumptions that may or may not be made about certain people. And it really does resonate. And it's a nice short way to kind of bring us all into the conversation and all to see kind of where we fit and how we can how we all have a role to play when it comes to building that belonging and building it together. And so we've done some work now to get a better sense of what belonging looks like or could feel like, maybe a little bit more about what it doesn't look like, and a bit about how we are. Inclusion starts with I, and our role in fostering inclusion. So I want you to continue to reflect on that and what belonging looks like in a long-term care home as we move through the rest of our session here today. And so thinking about what it actually feels like, and how we can foster that and build that further, and build belonging together. So thank you all for throwing your responses into the Mentimeter, showing that you never know what an individual is feeling and that experience is subjective. Absolutely. And so that there is lots to consider when it comes to every person that we are interacting with and coming across as we move through our day-to-day life. So now that we've kind of situated ourselves, I want to introduce and talk about a concept that is really central to the work that we do in the EDI program at the Ontario CLRI. And it's also really foundational to building that belonging. And that's cultural humility. So you may have heard cultural competence, which is the idea that we can learn enough about other cultures to navigate them well. And it's a useful starting point, but it does have a limitation in the sense that it treats culture as something static that you can study and that you can get it right, that you can become fully competent, in the sense that it implies that there's a stopping point, that there's a destination that you can label yourself as competent in another culture or another experience, and you can check that box, is where it tends to lead us a lot of the time. Whereas cultural humility takes a little bit of a different approach. It's really a practice orientation. It's ongoing, it's reflective, it's rooted in relationships. And there's three things that really sit at the heart of cultural humility. So it's a commitment to our own self-reflection. It's being genuinely open to learning from the person in front of us. And it's a willingness to treat that person, whether it be a resident, a caregiver, a family member, as the authority on their own life and needs. And so in long-term care, this might look like not assuming a resident's family structure based on who's actually visiting, not assuming religious needs based on a name or appearance, and always asking the questions, being curious rather than assuming. So we're asking what matters to this person and how they want to be cared for, how they want to be supported, what would be meaningful for them. And so to help really absorb what cultural humility can look like and feel like in long-term care, we in the EDI program worked with some folks to create a video. It's a short video. We're going to watch it together. It's about 5 minutes. It's also available on our website. It's a useful video for having conversations around cultural humility and what it can look like and what it can feel like in long-term care. And it really illustrates what it looks like in a care context. So as you watch, similar to what we did with the Inclusion Starts with I video, I want you to note, reflect on what's standing out to you, and what are some of the ways that Pine Grove Villa, which is the fictional home in the video, the ways that Pine Grove Villa supports diverse populations that live, that work, and also visit in their long-term care home. So I'm going to queue up that video for us, and we'll spend a few moments learning more about cultural humility.
This long-term care home is full of life and diversity, home to a wide variety of people and their stories. Here, people live, work, visit, and learn, each bringing their unique self to our community. In this video, we'll introduce the concept of cultural humility, a foundation of our community. We'll explore how this concept comes to life in what we do every day. Cultural humility is the practice of keeping an open mind and heart, constantly learning about and from others' experiences and backgrounds. It means acknowledging we don't know everything about cultures different from our own, being willing to listen, learn, and unlearn, treating everyone's story and identity with respect and without assumption, and creating a place where everyone feels valued and included. Let's join Mira, a preceptor, as she introduces Anea and Bruno, our new team members, to the resident home area.
Here at Pine Brook Villa, we intentionally get to know the residents' unique identities, and we have different ways to share that information to help the team. One way is our memory boxes, a personal gallery where a resident can display important items. You'll also see where we have the resident name. They decide what is displayed here. Several residents here go by a nickname. They also have the option to display their pronouns if they wish.
Today, we have a new person moving in around 10 a.m. She prefers Joe, short for Josephine. She's coming from the hospital. She recently fell at home, fractured her left hip, and since she is living with dementia, her care needs have increased. Her husband, Samuel, is no longer able to manage her needs at home. She uses a wheelchair and requires a one-person assist for transfers. This move will be a big change for Joe and Samuel. Joe is 87 years old and is a retired teacher.
I gave Samuel a tour last week, and he shared that Joe really appreciates having her hair and nails done. He also mentioned that she is Jewish and her faith is very important to her. She adheres to kosher food, so something to make sure the dietary team knows.
This is our multi-faith room. We encourage anyone, including team members, to practice their religion or spirituality. We have various spiritual and religious texts, and smudging kits, prayer mats, and meditation cushions. It's an evolving space as we receive new requests and new residents.
As they head into the dining room as part of the tour, Jay, another team member, is helping Francine, a resident, with lunch. Suddenly, Jay and Mira start chatting in Hindi.
The resident seems lost. Does she understand Hindi? Maybe I should mention it, but is it my place?
I hope you both enjoyed the tour. We're excited to have you join the team.
Thank you, Mira. I'm going back to the home area. Take care.
Mira, sorry to bring this up, but I noticed that while you were speaking with Jai in Hindi, the resident looked a bit confused. Maybe we should check in with her.
Oh, don't apologize. I appreciate you bringing this up. And you're right. Francine doesn't speak Hindi. I slipped into it with Jay without even registering. It's important that we make sure everyone feels included, especially in that moment when Francine was just in the dining room trying to enjoy her lunch. I shouldn't have done that in that moment. Thanks for bringing that up, Anaya. I'll go check in with Francine. We're all learning to be better at making everyone feel at home.
Later that day.
Hey, how was your first day?
Surprisingly good. Learned a lot.
What stood out?
A lot of considerations were made to support diversity here. We had a moment in the dining hall with my preceptor. Shared my thoughts, and she was actually receptive.
Glad to hear. My day was less positive. Didn't feel as welcoming.
Sorry to hear that. Let's chat later. Heading home now.
Pinebrook Villa is a community where people's identities and stories matter. Today, we witnessed how embracing cultural humility can improve lives by connecting with people on a deeper level and ensuring well-being by supporting cultural needs without making assumptions. Cultural humility is about approaching from a place of curiosity. A commitment to cultural humility helps everyone feel they belong. Learn more about cultural humility and other resources available to you from the Ontario Centres for Learning, Research and Innovation in Long-Term Care.
Okay, once again, we can sit with the video, sit with what was standing out for us. If there's anything that we learned or we kind of saw as we moved through the video. So sit with that, and when you're ready, feel free to share your reflections in the chat or go to our lovely mentee again and share any reflections that you might have had or anything that was resonating with you. We're seeing in the chat ongoing complaints from residents about workers speaking their primary language, and it's a repeat concern within our home without any resolution. Absolutely. It is. This is why this scenario was chosen. It is a common occurrence, and so some of the things that we suggest for folks is having a distinction between kind of the care interaction and speaking the primary language of the resident in front of the resident. And then in staff spaces, team spaces, that's where we can communicate more easily and more effectively in our primary languages. So having policies around the distinction. And there are some great examples of policies that can be put in place that give folks clear guidance on when and where it is useful, effective, efficient, and inclusive, depend for the language that you're using in the interaction. So we also see the person-centered approach, getting to know the person, absolutely. So getting to know the resident who's moving in that huddle, getting to know the space and what you can say and share and speak up about. What stood out for folks in the mentee is learning from mistakes and having that environment where mistakes aren't disciplinary action. There's an opportunity to learn and grow from taking a mistake and also taking accountability in those moments. Sometimes there's fear of bringing up these observations due to the possibility of offending the other person. Absolutely. There was that question of like, should I bring it up? Because I don't know my preceptor very well. I don't know how it's going to be received. But in this moment, the decision was made to say something, and it was very well received because there is that space that they created within this home in particular, which is the best case scenario for sure. Being comfortable with speaking up, calling people out when needed, and calling people in. Yes, being able to call people into conversation and to highlight maybe, you know what, maybe that didn't land or the way that you intended, or I'm not quite sure you meant that the way that it came across, and being able to have those conversations. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we move into our next section. Made me more aware of when there are conversations at a dining table between caregivers, might be excluding the resident. Yeah, in that dining interaction in particular, it's important that we are including our residents. It's their meal space, it's their meal time. And we don't want to be creating the conditions where they feel excluded. Policy and program changes as we learn from resident needs. Yeah, we can integrate what we learn, what we hear into our policies and our programs. How important it is for everyone to feel safe to bring up concerns. Yeah, creating that psychological safety where if you voice a concern or you voice an observation that you saw, that you're not going to feel like it's going to come back at you and you'll be reprimanded in some way, or it's going to impact your work environment. So really putting in the effort within organizations to create that sense of safety and support in learning, growing, and unlearning as well. So creating safer spaces, absolutely. So putting in that effort, having those conversations, they may be difficult to have at the start because sometimes our systems aren't built to support that inclusion, that safety, but they're well worth having and well worth pushing through that discomfort, because what happens on the other side is that folks will respect the creativity, the diversity of thought, of experience, and folks will, it's all going to be better and in service for the residents we support, the family members in our spaces, the caregivers in our spaces, the team members. It really brings the opportunity for everyone to thrive, feel included, like they belong. So fantastic. Thank you all for sharing and for reflecting on our Culture, Humility, and Action video. The link will be included in the slide deck when we circulate that afterwards. And so it really highlights, I think, that culture humility isn't something that we achieve, it's something that we strive for, it's something that we practice every day in every interaction with each person. And it's encouraging, because what we're seeing here in our responses and in our reflections is it means that you don't have to have it all figured out at the start. It's what we're aiming for. It's those conversations that we're pushing through, if they might be a little bit difficult or challenging, and we're working in service, we're learning. It's an ongoing journey. Okay, so what does this mean in terms of our day-to-day practice of building belonging together? Family members, caregivers sometimes tell me that they can see something isn't working. So a resident who's withdrawn, a dynamic that feels off, maybe staff aren't interacting with the resident in their primary language, but they're not sure if it's their place to say something. And so I want us to remember the stories that we shared at the beginning, and I want to say something directly. It is your place to say something if you feel confident, feel comfortable and supported to do so. We're not just peripheral figures in this work. The relationships that we bring, the questions that we ask, and the culture that we help set up within our homes and in our family councils all shape what belonging looks like in our homes. And so we really do each have a role to play in creating that culture of belonging. And so we've talked a little bit about like what it is, how we can approach it in the abstract. So thinking about culture humility, what belonging feels like. And for our last little bit of time together, we're going to talk about what we can actually do and make sense of kind of what are some of the small actions that we can take. And the answer really depends on your role or your affiliation or interaction with long-term care. So, but residents, caregivers, family council members, interprofessional team members, leaders, we all have different kinds of leverage. We all have different kinds of scope, of control, of confidence when it comes to these conversations. And building that belonging requires all of us and all of those skills and values that we bring into this conversation. But today I'm going to focus on two groups. So we're going to talk about family councils, family members, caregivers, and then also team members. So first, thinking about family councils. So family councils, I think we all understand and see them as advocacy bodies. So raising issues, providing feedback, pushing for improvements within the homes. And that's vital work. It's really the fundamental purpose of a council and what brings people together on behalf of residents and families and caregivers. And I'm going to build upon that and also say that family councils are also culture builders within our homes. So we can see councils as setting the tone for who feels welcome in these spaces or welcome at the table, so to speak, shaping by example what kind of space it is. So thinking about who gets heard, whose experiences count, how disagreements or conflicting opinions get handled. EDI work or that building belonging work doesn't just happen in the home itself, it also happens within our councils. And so today I'm going to share 3 entry points when we think about family councils as culture builders, building that sense of belonging. And so the first is setting up those ground rules or guiding principles for your council. And so similar to the way that I spent some time to set the space, to lay out the guiding principles for our session today, we can do the same and lean on that tool within our councils and within our meetings. So if our councils don't have those explicit guiding principles for how we meet, so that's norms around mutual respect, confidentiality, how we handle different perspectives, it's a really solid place to start for folks. And it could be something as simple as at the start of the meeting, laying out, like we said, we listen to understand, not just to respond, or we're speaking from our own experience, not on behalf of all residents. And so having these simple statements and having them visible throughout the meeting. And like I said, you can lean on the slide that I shared at the start. These norms and building them into norms of how we respect each other, how we come into community and conversation with each other, really help to make that feeling of belonging possible. And it's really encouraging for folks, and it encourages people, to speak up and to feel like they can speak up and to feel heard when they may otherwise keep quiet. And so, or they might just come to a meeting, feel like they couldn't share their opinions or their perspectives, and then not come back again. So having these guiding principles can set the tone, but also if things get a little off track or things go a little sideways in those conversations, it helps us to reorient the conversation, and we can point to our guiding principles and recenter ourselves. So that's the first thing that we can do to help set that shared space, that space of accountability within our councils. And so that's the first thing we can do. The second thing that we can do is start noticing gaps in representation. So what do I mean by that? I mean, who's at the table, who comes to our meetings, who doesn't? Are there families or caregivers whose voices are consistently absent? Who isn't showing up? And thinking about and taking the effort to reflect on that, to name it, is really worth it. We're not doing it in a sense to judge. We're not trying to be hard on ourselves and being like, oh, you know what? There's a whole group of folks that don't come to our meetings, have never come. It's not to be hard on ourselves. It's an opportunity to do things differently and to ask, what are we missing? What are the barriers that might be keeping people away? What are those barriers, those obstacles, those gaps that folks have to navigate in order to feel like they can even step into this space? And what can we do to help reduce those barriers, to minimize those barriers, to support folks in coming into space and feeling like they're welcomed in those spaces. So what are the things that we can do? And there's a Health Quality Ontario has a really fantastic guide that has some really great tips, strategies for recruiting for diversity. And I'll share the link and also highlight the resource again when we get to the resources section. So when we think about it, it's incumbent upon us and our councils, and that leads us really to our third point, which is creating a welcoming culture. So we're starting with our guiding principles. That is an easy one, a relatively easy one to implement. We're reflecting on who's in our space. And then as we're asking those questions about what are those barriers, we can also reflect on what we're doing to create a welcoming culture. And so when someone new shows up, what's their experience? Reflecting on that. Are they introduced? Do they understand the structure, how decisions get made? And so it's those first few interactions where folks decide if they're going to keep coming back. So we need to be putting in the effort in the front to ensure folks that know what's going on, to feel like they are welcomed in that space, that their presence is appreciated, is valued. And then it creates those conditions where folks want to come back again and again. And so when folks are in the meeting, another thing that we can also do is ensure that time is being shared among our members. So is there one voice or a couple of voices that tend to hold a lot of space within our meetings? And so we can use our facilitation strategies. We can go back to our guiding principles if we establish kind of that move up principle and encourage folks that may be a little bit quieter to draw them into the conversation by saying things like, you know what, so-and-so, that's a great thought. I'm also wondering what other folks think about whatever it is the topic that we're talking about today. And asking maybe the questions, are there any other perspectives that we might not have considered on this topic or this conversation point? And so in asking those questions that draw folks into the conversation and create that space where folks can feel like they can share their perspectives. So those are three strategies that we can have in those moments within our cultures, and thinking about how family councils can also help build that culture of belonging within our homes. And then next, I mentioned that we're going to talk a little bit about team members. And so for folks in this space who work in long-term care, I think it's important to state that you don't need to be in a leadership role to help shape belonging. Interprofessional team members are the most consistent shapers of belonging in long-term care because we're the ones with the daily, day-to-day contact and interaction with residents. So what are some of the things that we as team members could do and can do? So we can learn and use residents' preferred names. So in the video, we saw that there are some residents use nicknames or abbreviations of their names. So we can learn those, use those, learn their pronouns. And so if we're unsure at any point, we're going to ask. We're embracing that curiosity, asking and not assuming. And then moments where a colleague mispronounces a name or assumes incorrectly of someone's pronouns, we can step in and gently correct them. And that's really one of the most direct ways that you can signal to a resident that you're seen, I see you. And then in moments when you witness something that perhaps doesn't sit right, whether it's a discriminatory comment, a resident being dismissed, or a family member not being taken seriously, knowing that responding does matter. Even if we're saying, oh, we speak to everyone respectfully in this home, is a way of reinforcing and creating that culture of belonging. So if you think back to the story that I shared about the PSW earlier, it's really based on a little bit loosely a conversation that I heard recently where someone asked that question and we can expand upon it. What do you do if the bias is coming from a family member and not a team member? So this person was themselves in a situation where she felt she had to manage those comments, and she was frustrated that she had to be the one that was doing that work, which is really valid. And it's a signal that the system, that the culture within the home needs a shift. And it's not just an individual skill gap. And so it's a really important tension to acknowledge that responding to bias is really hard, and particularly for team members who worry about their working environment, who worry about kind of the day-to-day impact of speaking up. But one of the things that we can do when we witness something that isn't sitting right, that isn't okay, is if we can't in that moment step in and say something, we can circle back afterwards privately rather than in the moment. A quiet conversation after the fact is often most of the time effective rather than a public correction where people get a little defensive. And it's also easier for us to actually do, I think, for most of us. And so the language that we're using in that private conversation really focuses on that impact rather than what was intended. And we can say something like, oh, like I just wanted to mention what I heard earlier, because I think it landed a little bit differently than you may have intended. And it's not that it was, and so not saying that was wrong. You said something very wrong, but saying like, here's how it landed, here's how it felt. And here's why it matters and the impact of it all. And so that distinction, rather than kind of reprimanding, really gives folks somewhere to go and somewhere to be like, we're meeting them in that moment and showing them the impact of their actions. And more often than not, some folks double down. I will acknowledge that. But more often than not, people are like, oh no, like that's not at all what I meant. Here's what I meant. And then so being able to have that conversation and push it forward is really, really important. And so these aren't easy moments. And the goal isn't to have a perfect response. It's to practice those moments, practice those engagements. It's that consistency where a space, that consistency for folks and in that space where folks all deserve respect. That's the message. We all deserve respect. And we repeat that over and over and over again across teams, across our councils, across all of our interactions. And that's what builds the culture. And that's what contributes to building that culture of belonging. And so for team members who want a little bit more practice or support in navigating some of these situations, we have our EDI program has a Creating a Culture of Belonging workshop for team members and leaders, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. That is something that we can share and engage for that space to practice. Okay. So that's a lot of information. There's a lot of tips and tricks. We have covered a lot of ground, but I think we have got a few things that we can carry forward as we move on from our conversation today. So we've kind of picked up a few tidbits along the way today. Moving on from this session, what are some of the resources out there that we offer that can support us in moving forward? Some practical resources. And so I'm going to start wrapping things up by sharing some of these resources that might be helpful. All of them are free, available online, and directly relevant to the long-term care context. To kind of save myself in navigating the back and forth a bit, I'll drop all the links in the chat after I explain what all the resources are. So up first, we have a bilingual EDI and long-term care resource suite. And so we've been building this suite of resources since about 2018. We worked really closely with our advisory committee to go co-develop and share these resources that support long-term care homes in their journeys. So whether you're looking for an organizational assessment with an EDI lens, you can turn to our toolkit. for some tips and tricks in that assessment. If you're looking for posters to help raise awareness, some of these posters on the screen might look familiar from the walls in our Creating in that Culture, Humility, and Action video. So we have these posters available. You can reach out, and we're happy to send any posters to your homes to put in your spaces. We have our What Would You Do poster series. It is a series of posters with a variety of short scenarios that are meant to prompt conversation and reflection. The posters, they come with a facilitation guide. So if you want to bring a poster to a huddle, or you want to bring the suite of resources to your home and share them with the home's team and be like, you know what, this might be a great resource to have some conversations, to start building our awareness. The facilitation guide is there to help. We can also use these resources within our councils to have those conversations, to have that awareness raising moment. There's lots of resources within our resource suite that is available in both English and French. And I'll share the link in the chat after I'm done here. I'll also say our toolkit, we are in the process of updating it. It's still super relevant. It's still really helpful. But our toolkit that is going to be coming out next spring will also have a revamped and a stronger family and residence lens within it. So keep an eye out next spring when we launch our updated, refreshed, revamped toolkit. Okay, so that's part of our resources. One of our most commonly accessed, a key component of our EDI resource suite, so that's why I like to pull it out and have its own feature, is our diversity and inclusion calendars. So we have a couple of versions of it. We've got a planning calendar that helps long-term care teams compile and source religious and cultural days of significance, awareness days, weeks, months, health promotion days, helps us plan events. So thinking about our friends in the rec department, helping to plan events. And then we have our digital calendar and our printable bulletin board calendars, which look really great on our bulletin boards and in our homes, that help us to promote various dates of significance and awareness. So all of them are available on our website. We every year print a certain number of the calendars that we can ship out. So feel free to reach out if you're interested in a calendar. But everything is available. You can print them on your own from our website. Our printable calendars are also available in French. So that is also a really neat resource for folks that help us as another entry point into having conversations and raising awareness and education, is getting to know the various different dates of significance across cultures, across religions, across communities. Fantastic resource there. And then for the team members and leadership in long-term care, I mentioned quickly, and I do want to highlight this resource because it's very relevant to the conversation that we've been having today. If you are a family member or a family council member, a caregiver, and you're seeing gaps, so those moments where residents don't feel seen or conversations are being had, or where team members seem uncertain about how to respond and step in, one of the most practical things you can do is bring this resource to the attention of the leadership within the home that you're connected to, because the Creating a Culture of Belonging workshop, it's free. It's a virtual 4-hour workshop that's available to long-term care homes across the province. Homes are provided backfill support for team members to participate. And so you can be the person who says, you know what, this resource exists. I think we'd benefit from it in our home. That's part of advocacy. That's part of culture building. So if you're a team member, bring this to your leadership. Say, hey, I want to participate in this. If you're a family member, bring it to leadership and say, hey, this will be useful for the folks in our home, I think, and share that resource. I'll add the link in the chat at the end here. And then if you haven't already, we also haven't already subscribed, feel free to do so. We have our EDI and long-term care newsletter, which is a quarterly newsletter. That's a great way to stay up to date on new tools, learning opportunities, various success stories or spotlights from long-term care homes across the province. It's quick, it's easy, it keeps you connected, and we also highlight some of those prominent dates of significance for various months in our newsletters as well. So you can sign up by scanning the QR code, going to the link that I'll share in the chat. And one of the things that we put the effort into doing is curating our back issues. So all of the additions that we have put out are also available on our website. So if you're curious about, hey, what was that fall newsletter last year? What did we include there? Feel free to go back and check it out and to stay up to date. So there's our newsletter. And then the resource that I pointed out for creating more inclusive, building that belonging within our councils, the resource that I mentioned are from Health Quality Ontario. So recruiting for diversity, creating, sustaining patient and family advisory councils, has a lot of great information within that guide. How to consider many kinds of diversity, how to remove those barriers to participation, how to recruit for diversity, so some tips and tools for reaching out and getting the message out and getting and connecting with folks. It's a really great, it's short, practical read, helps us to build more representative councils, and I will pop the link in the chat now. I'll pop all the links in the chat now. Just bear with me while I copy and paste. So we've got our EDI resource suite in the chat. We've got our diversity and inclusion link in the chat. Creating a culture of belonging, our newsletter, and a link directly to the HQO guide. Okay, so this brings us to us starting to wrap up, to reflect on the journey that we took here today. And so we're going to pop back into our Mentimeter and think about today's session. Think about the questions that we've asked of ourselves, the videos that we've seen, the conversations that we've had through Menti, and think about what is one thing that you're taking away from today's session. Is it a concept? Is it a tool? Is it questions that you want to continue to reflect on? Something that you want to try? I'll put the link back in the chat just in case some of us have lost our Menti window. And then I will queue up the questions. I'm curious to hear a little bit about what folks are taking away from today's session. Tips for caregivers to use when they see an issue, absolutely. I'm so happy to hear that it's a continuous process. Absolutely it is. It's an ongoing journey. We're continuing to learn, we're continuing to grow. Fantastic resources to share with family councils, to utilize and learn with. So happy to hear that. The importance of being open to learning and unlearning, absolutely. If we're open and we come with a kind heart and a curiosity, that is really key to building that culture of belonging, to embracing cultural humility. We'll give it another couple moments for folks to reflect. It's important to have uncomfortable discussions to create belonging. Yeah, it's in that discomfort, in that uncomfortability that growth happens. And so I want to distinguish between kind of discomfort and that you don't feel safe. that's one thing. That's not what we're talking about here. That's a separate issue that comes from not having a culture of belonging. But having that discomfort and be like, you know what? I feel like my boundaries are being, or I feel like my knowledge is growing. I feel like I'm growing. I feel like I'm unlearning. This is an opportunity moment that we can do and sit in to create belonging. So recognizing everyone's uniqueness, absolutely. Making an effort to understand the different cultures within the home, identify the gaps of who's not a member of family council and what we're missing. Yeah, what are the barriers, that potential barriers that folks might be facing, and maybe they have a little interest in joining your council, but they haven't quite figured out what is it, what does it do, how do I join? Thinking about kind of some of those barriers. What are we missing? All right. These are really fantastic reflections. I'm so happy to see that folks are taking away some opportunity, the importance of learning and unlearning, some tips, some resources, the acknowledgement that this is a continuous process, that we're going to make the effort, that we're going to start, we're recognizing everyone is unique and individualized. This is really fantastic, folks. And so thank you so much for sharing. And so I'm going to start wrapping up. And so I want to close by coming back to that Menti we did at the start, where we were thinking about what does belonging mean to you? And we heard things like feeling seen, feeling welcomed, feeling valued, sense of home, even. And those words didn't come from a policy document. They came from within each of us. And that's the point that I want to leave you with, that the capacity for building belonging in long-term care is already here. It's already in this space. So it doesn't get built all at once, as much as we would like it to. It gets built one conversation at a time, one decision at a time, one council meeting at a time. It's when we do this work together that residents, oh, thanks for pointing out. I will make sure that it is updated for us in when we share the resources at the end, or in our Q&A period. I can pull it up and share it. But it's that work that we do together, one decision at a time, and we want to do that work together. Residents, family members, caregivers, our teams, the councils, the community partners. Let's remember the communities around our homes have a lot of great resources. And when we all work together, we can create something that lasts. So before we move into questions, I do want to share a short survey. It takes about 2 minutes. It's a couple of questions, just to get a sense of your reflections on the session. Because we do use the feedback to continually improve our sessions. So improve our sessions, but then we're also generally curious what EDI-related situations are councils navigating, what inclusive practices are your council using already, so that we can share it with other folks we come across. For example, in a previous session, we had a great example where a council has moved their meetings off-site to improve accessibility, reduce cancellations during outbreaks. And so it's that kind of knowledge that lives in these sessions and in these spaces, and we want to be able to share that. So we want to hear from you. Take a couple moments to complete and reflect on our post-session survey. I'll put it up on the screen here. You can scan the QR code. It also lives in Menti. It's a different code, so it's going to take you to a different Menti that you can navigate yourself and answer all of the questions. So you're going to have to go to menti.com, enter 16063336, and that'll take you to the survey. Please take a few moments to share your feedback, reflect on your experience. I'm genuinely curious to hear what you have to share and say. The HQO guide. Okay. Broken link. Let me one just moment. Page not found. Hmm. Interesting. Okay. I have a feeling that it's no longer available on the internet, but I will track down. I have the PDF available. It's a fantastic resource. We can share it with the slide deck. Okay, so while folks continue to engage in this survey and to reflect on our experiences here today, I just want to wrap up and finish by saying thank you again for being here. Thank you again for your thoughtful comments and reflections as we move through today's session. And now I think we have a few moments. I'm willing to stay a little bit past 11:30. There's lots of discussion, lots of questions. So feel free to pop them in the Q&A chat.
Thank you, Ashley, for this presentation. I think Tiffany put a couple of questions that were shared in the chat, but in the Q&A box. Do you have access to the Q&A box?
Let's pull
You
it
should
up.
see it in your menu.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Yes, I can see it. So our family council and resident council have worked on a project to build cultural dinners or to include cultural dinners on a monthly basis. Can you speak to what steps families, residents, and staff can do to adopt these practices? Absolutely. Food brings people together across cultures, um, across individuals, across families. And so I think food is a really great connection point. And what folks can do, I think it can start with talking to the residents, getting a sense of what foods are they missing, what foods would they like to see, what kind of dinners would they like to have. Um, on a monthly basis is fantastic. If we can get it more regularly, I think that's even a great moment too. But what kind of foods would residents like to see? What kind of food would they like to have? And then it's having a conversation with our food services manager, our food services folks about what can we do to make this happen in a way that, aligns with our regulations and aligns with what we need to do in order to ensure safety in our food. But we can do that and we can offer it to all residents. We can also work with our rec programming and to have, maybe it's a rotating basis of residents that come on a monthly basis to have like a diners club, and we can do cultural dinners on that monthly basis. There's lots of opportunity and creative ideas when we talk to our residents and our team members about those cultural dinners. So those are just some quick ideas. So feel free to take or leave what resonates. But yeah, it all starts with talking to residents. What do they want to see? What are the foods? We could also, sorry, one last thing I'll say, we could also link it to different days of awareness in different months. So if there's, I think tomorrow is Filipino Heritage Day. So if there's Filipino foods or staff that want to come in and share, it's a great moment to do it as well. So lots of ways that we can approach it.
I see that Rennie has shared that their home has introduced kitchens that family members can use to cook or bake with their loved ones.
That's fantastic. Yeah, having the opportunity for families to share that space of making a meal together. I think that's really lovely as well. I love to hear that.
Heather has shared a home that I work with, the family council. They created a spice rack, which could be passed around during a meal to adjust the food to residents' preference.
See, we just have to crowdsource some ideas that are really fantastic. Yeah, sharing a spice rack. I love that. I love that. That helps folks, adjust different spice levels, different levels of heat or different levels of flavor. Absolutely. Okay. Lots of great ideas there. And then the last question we have around complaints from residents when workers are speaking their primary language or pre-concern. Yeah, we chatted a little bit about this, but I think it really comes down to um, kind of that resident-centered perspective of like if we're engaging with our residents and they are in our space and they can't understand what we're saying, so whatever language it is that we're speaking, we need to be mindful of that and speaking the language that the resident speaks in front of residents. That's one thing to consider. And the other thing to consider is that if it is like a care conversation between colleagues and it is more efficient or easier for folks to communicate together in a team space, so whether you're in the team lounge or you're in the break room or you're in a private office and you're having a conversation and it's easier to communicate in the language that the two or whoever's in that conversation share, that's fine. But when we're interacting with residents in front of residents, we should be using the language that the residents speak. Absolutely. And so it's having those policies and having that clear policies to lean back on and to guide folks into what the expectation is within our homes, and how we can support folks in making those choices and in ways that are meaningful and inclusive of our residents. Mhm.
If folks have any other questions, this is the moment. You can put it in the Q&A box, or if you have anything you want to share, you can do so in the chat. I think we'll still wait a little bit. New question from Rennie. Does anyone currently provide welcome baskets to new residents and family members? We're currently putting some thoughts to this that also include information on the community around us.
Oh, interesting. I think that that's a great place to start. And I'm interested to hear what other folks on the call include in their welcome packages for residents within their homes. But I think that's a great idea to include some local resources, include any of those resident-facing materials that are relevant. So if you think like the Resident Bill of Rights, make sure that it's available in the primary language or that folks speak and communicate in. And so there's kind of those like logistical pieces. So making sure that people have the information that they need in the language that they understand. Resources in the community. If you know a little bit about the resort or the resident and kind of the activities or their interests, and that there's the opportunity to either go out into community that surrounds the home or bring community in, flagging that for folks is a really great way. Kind of also a nice thing to do is create like little comforts of home for folks. If you know they like knitting, maybe have like a little bit of a little welcome package for that, or a little some knitting needles or a ball of yarn or something into the package, just to help them feel like you see them and that you've listened to all those conversations that you've had, and the information that's provided to you as you move in.
And
I
Heather
think
shared that a home that they worked with did that. It was full of government stock that residents are already providing, like toothbrush, toothpaste, hairbrush, shampoo, etc. It was put together in a basket and was wrapped when a new resident was admitted.
Yeah, exactly. So just think about if someone was like, moving into a new apartment or a new home, like what are those things that help you like welcome somebody into a new space or show that you are excited about them moving into a new space. And so those little thoughtful touches go a really, really long way.
And having a welcome card as well, from the resident council, absolutely.
Handwritten even if we can, something that is a little bit more personalized. Fantastic.
So I don't think I'm seeing any other questions coming in. If folks have anything to share, this is the moment. Ashley, do you have any final things you would like to share with everybody before we end things?
I am good. I'm just so grateful to have been able to share the space with everyone here today and to speak a little bit. I know we've just started the conversation. It's something that's ongoing, but to be able to, to engage in this conversation and to share just a little bit of knowledge, and to also receive some knowledge from everybody here has been really lovely. And I really appreciate the opportunity. So thanks to FCO for inviting me, and thanks to everybody for being in this space. It's been really lovely. It's been a really lovely way to spend the morning.